Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Microsoft 365 Pulse. I am joined by the lovely and beautiful Tom Duff, and it is actually just the two of us today. So you guys get to hang out with us as we go through and look at the new updates coming through for the M365 suite. There's a good bit of stuff. I mean, it's not overly long, but it's a nice mix of nerdy things that I like and SharePoint and organization things and productivity things that Tom likes. So it should be a good show. As always, guys, we're going to go through the 3/4 major sections that happen through the roadmap. We're going to start in development, which means it's just been announced on the roadmap. They've confirmed that they're working on it or would like to work on it, but nothing real progress has been made. From in development, it hops to rolling out, which means they're now starting to send it into preview type functionality for some of the tenants. Oftentimes you'll see first release tenants get it first, or maybe friends and family, and they'll roll out bigger and bigger from there. And then ultimately you get to the point of launched. At that point, everyone that it's scoped to, considering if it's scoped to your cloud or not, in your region or not, should have the feature. And then finally, we actually do have several things canceled, although they're kind of fake cancels. They're cancellations for the most part where it's just being moved somewhere else and something like that. So let's go ahead and get started with it. Tom, you want to take it away during rolling out?
Sure, I'll hit a few here and then give you a chance to
Or in
catch
development,
your
I
breath.
lied.
Yes, I knew what you were talking about.
Yeah.
So the first one that I have to laugh because I think they've been promising to do something like this for like the last 2 years. Apparently, they're actually going to do it this time. And that is on Microsoft Teams. They're pairing the channel and the corresponding SharePoint folder name. So
I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation.
I know. It was like they were going to, do something special on the folder, not golden, because that was something else, but make the folder look different to say, hey, this is not a regular folder in your document library. This is a special folder that's tied to a channel in your Teams workspace that's associated with this. Well, it just never really seemed to happen. Now, what they're doing is if you go out to the document library that's part of your Teams workspace, and you happen to go into a folder that is matched up with one of the channels, there's going to be like a banner up at the top that says, hey, this is part of your Teams channel. Basically, do not change the name of it. Do not delete it. Do not do any of these horrible things to it, because if you do, you're going to mess things up. I really want to believe it's going to happen this time. And if it happens, I will definitely be communicating it out. But yeah, that is in development. We're supposed to get it in May. We will see. Couple of things that have shown up on the list that are of interest to me, at least. They're doing some updates for Microsoft Teams connected team sites. Now, they don't go into any detail. What they say here is every Microsoft Teams team is connected to a SharePoint team site. If you create a private channel, it gets a unique team site. Yeah, we know all that. You will see specific updates, including updates to site features, site permission alignment, site classifications and sensitivity labels, and improvements to the user interface. I'm kind of all for that because I think that it can get rather messy sometimes when you're trying to look at a team site and figure out how the team site exists in relation to ship to the team itself, especially if they start doing some cleanup on site permissions, because those can get really ugly really quickly. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this one plays out and what exactly are the individual items that they're going to be doing here. So that's supposed to be out in May this month. We'll see. OneDrive and SharePoint adjusting version retention for PST files. PST files are the files that store all your Outlook emails. And of course, as you might imagine, there's a lot of activity in those. Well, if you have that set up in OneDrive for backup purposes and the whole bit, if you have versioning turned on to like 500, you're going to be talking some really big hunkin' PST files that are just overly versioning themselves. So now you're going to be able to limit the number of PST versions retained. So maybe you like want to retain one a day rather than one every 2 minutes every time a new email comes in. So I think that's going to be nice.
This feature makes me laugh because for the longest time they tried to prevent people from uploading PST files. It was something they didn't want to do. They tried to put features that made it harder, and like people just kept doing it. So I see this as in like, fine, like you can do it, but we're not going to allow you to break yourself.
You win. What else do we have here? If you're used to what they call modern comments, which if you've played with them in Word and stuff like that, it's having your comments down the right-hand side of the pane. You can mention people, the whole bit. That new experience is coming to PowerPoint. So it will now be similar to what you have in Word, various lists, stuff like that. So keep an eye open for that. That should be in June. Outlook, they're going to let you dictate emails on iPhones and iPads. That ought to be fun. Can't wait to see that one. Even though I'm not going to go on too much, because last week when I talked about, whoa, this is cool, Cortana, y'all laughed at me. So yeah, we're just going to let that one go here. And then the last one that I kind of wanted to bring up is that in Microsoft Teams public preview, they are doing Teams following Office preview. So public preview has provided IT admins with the ability to allow their users to receive preview features in Teams before they're released to the public. Coming in June, not only can users be opted in to use Teams public preview, but IT admins can even configure Teams user preview state to follow Office preview state. So basically, they're giving you some ability to allow certain people in your organization to stay more up to date with the latest and greatest in Teams, potentially before it rolls out to the rest of your company. So given that Teams is really a big thing, and you probably have a group of people who are focused on supporting Teams but may not need to see the latest and greatest on everything else, this will help you in that regard. So that's probably it for the in-dev side on mine. If you want to go with your geeky things there, my friend.
Sure. So really, I'll only mention two other things, and we can move on in the show. So first and foremost, for Microsoft Defender for 365, I actually thought this was cool and nice of them. They have what they're calling advanced delivery for SecOps, mailboxes, and third-party phishing simulations. So the idea is, you as a company go out and decide you're going to use this third-party service that sends robust phishing campaigns as a training to your users. Now, in the past, this would cause a problem because all of the security settings and stuff that you had configured would not like these phishing emails that went through. Even if you whitelisted some stuff, Microsoft would sometimes still take action because they would see it as phishing campaigns and stuff like that. So this is basically them giving a special feature that will allow you as an admin to configure, hey, this is what's happening, this is why it's coming in, and basically tell it, more or less, I'm using a third-party tool to purposely phish my users, it's okay. But so kind of a nice thing out there. It doesn't force you to try to use their system if you already have a partner or a service you're happy with. It's Microsoft playing nice with others. And I've definitely had this conversation with multiple customers of like, yeah, well, you can do it, but like there's a chance Microsoft might just not deliver it to your user because they know better than your
Right.
user and think it's bad.
Nobody clicks on our phishing emails. That's because nobody sees them.
Yeah, right. The other thing that I thought was kind of cool, going all the way to the bottom of our list. So it was the idea of Microsoft Compliance Center and Microsoft Teams for Business Compliance Center. What they're calling it is compliance capabilities for card content generated through apps. What this basically means is if you are using M365 Compliance Center and you're doing stuff related to anything that falls under that realm, so think retention policies, stuff like that, this is now going to extend out to content that's actually generated by the apps that can integrate with Teams. So think about the various apps that you can go in and plug in Teams and what it does. Before, you were just covering chat messages and stuff like that. Now this is going to be covering the content that's actually generated from there. I hadn't realized this wasn't covered before. Teams was a moderate new addition to what they're doing from the Compliance Center, but actually cool that they're doing this and they're going through and doing it. I'm sure if you're a company, you're needing to be HIPAA, you're needing to be NIST 800, 171, whatever it is. So the fact that they're extending it out is kind of cool. So the other thing I'll mention briefly for us, there's a decent amount of things they added in for updates to Edge, from everything from version 0.91, which I think is either the next release or the release after that, all the way to some stuff for 0.94. Again, if you use Edge and you're curious about what's coming down the pipeline, you can go through and dig through that. I don't think it's necessarily that impactful unless it's something really cool for us to go through and talk about all those updates every time they come out, because it seems like there's like 5 or 6 peppered in through all the different sections all the time at this point.
Sounds good.
All right, so I guess moving on from there, we're going to rolling out again, as we kind of talked about at the start. It's now started entering access to some tenants, whether you're first release, whether you're a specific opt-in, whether it's public preview, whatever it is. But so we're going to go through there, and Tom, you want to go ahead and take it away again?
Sure. Now, with rolling out, many of these things are items we've discussed before. So if we're looking at them going, yeah, I've talked about that one before, talked about that one twice before, not that big of a deal. There are a couple things in here, though, that I don't think I remember seeing in development, but they're now in rolling out status. So that's kind of cool. One of the, well, yeah, let's speak, Tom. Microsoft Teams out of office. What they're now giving you the ability to do in your Teams client is you can actually set your out of office indicator in Teams, and it will sync up with your out of office indicator in Outlook. So you've always been able to set your out of office in Outlook, and Teams will pick it up and give you whatever messaging you have out there, and that's all great. However, now if you live in Teams and you just want to stay in Teams with this, you can actually set your out of office there, and it will then sync over and send out of office messages for email, the whole bit. We kind of talked about this on a meeting that we do internally in open office hours thing yesterday, and we do have it in our tenant. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. And somebody said, well, but can you send your out of office messages externally? I don't know. So we called it up, and they actually kind of like the Teams version better now, because in Outlook, if you want to send an external message saying you're out of office, you have to switch to a different tab to do it. Where here they have both of the boxes on top of each other, so you can set all your messages in one place without having to tab and go back and forth and stuff. So they thought that was really cool. Again, it's rolling out, which means you should have it if you don't already. I was really surprised that we did have it. The other thing that I wanted to point out that we've talked about, all part of the Viva and the whole bit going on there, is the whole insights piece that you can now plug into Teams. And that's the one that gives you some insights, basically saying, as they say, users can create mental bookends to productively
There you go.
start and mindfully end the day with a virtual commute, tap into dedicated moments of mindfulness with Headspace, and use emotional check-ins to pause and reflect. I'm actually kind of looking forward to this one. I'm not a meditation person, but I recently saw a session. It was part of the virtual marathon one that they did last week, I think. And he was talking about, you have certain ceremonies to start your day, end your day, start your week, end your week. And it gives you that feeling of, okay, I'm in control with what I've got. I know what's going on. I know what I'm going to be doing the next day. And you follow that routine. It really sets up yourself mentally to be productive and ready to go. And I think Insights is going to allow me to do a little better job at that, especially the virtual commute, to say, I'm about done with work. Let me review what I've got tomorrow. Let me make sure everything's cool. Let me step away, take a deep breath, and go, I'm not at work any longer, because I just stepped 5 feet away and out the door of my home office. So looking forward to seeing that one. And again, that should be in a client near you.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things too, going through and looking at it with how they're doing. Nice to see the updates coming through. I've actually seen the out of office one in Planets tenant. When we go through and do it, I actually noticed that earlier this week. The AM that I work with most closely actually had it configured through Teams. I could see the information when you pulled up chat. You could just tell they were out of office and stuff like that. It was kind of cool to see.
Nice.
Outside of that, I don't have a ton of stuff I want to necessarily look at. As Tom said, a lot of these things we've actually gone through and mentioned whenever they were originally added in development. I'll give a shout out to Tamara here, because I know for a fact her or Jen would have talked about this one, with chat size going from 300 to 1,000 participants. Other than that, there's some kind of cool things coming through. One thing that I thought was particularly interesting, I'm sure you'll feel this way too, Tom, they're doing feedback from your organization is now coming to your admin center.
Yes.
With the idea being that if your end users provide feedback to Microsoft, because Microsoft has gotten pretty good at this point, and like asking users their opinion, giving them options through their apps and stuff to provide feedback. But before, it just went to the black box that was Microsoft, right? So the fact that they're now letting you get information about what your users are telling Microsoft is good. I think for two reasons. One, you may not be asking the right questions or the right people to get
Right.
feedback, and two, they may not be giving that same feedback to you. So I don't necessarily see this as like an invasion of privacy or anything, but like if you have a user that just hates a product they're doing, well, maybe that's a training opportunity. Maybe they just hate it. You don't know, but like getting that feedback is probably going to enable you as an organization to either further prepare for it, maybe,
Right.
identify training gaps, stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty cool that they're going to start surfacing that for people to be able to go through and see. Besides that, a couple of things to give shout outs to. Presence and offline presence status is coming to the government clouds. I know this has been a
Yay.
complaint of my users for a while in Teams on the GCC and GCCI, because if you can't set your presence status properly there, it's kind of annoying where people don't know what's going on. So the fact that that's coming is kind of cool. The other thing that I saw that I thought this was like terrifying to me, but I tend to be more admin. I want to control everything. They are adding in anonymous presenter support for live events, with
I
the
saw
idea
that.
being if you have a anonymous user who doesn't have a Microsoft Secure authentication or an Azure Active Directory identity, to be a presenter of your live event. So assumedly, if you're doing a live event, you're expecting a moderately large audience. Is what they're set up for. And so this is, I guess, supposed to be if like someone wanted to come in and ask a question and he wanted to do that or something like that. In my head, I kind of see this as, oh, well, the CEO has joined and he didn't log in properly and he's just angry and wants it to work. And go through and do that. But the idea that I'm going to have a live event that I'm just going to let some random freaking person that I have no idea who they are present is terrifying to me. But apparently that's coming out and rolling out to people right now. Anything
Yeah.
else you wanted to mention, Tom?
Not really. The only other thing I see in here that, again, I want to find it in our tenant just so I can see how it works. And that is for Outlook on the web, you can now do calendar board views, which is a different way to view your Outlook calendar. And from what I understand and from what I've seen in terms of images and things like that, you can set up these, for lack of a better term, project boards, where you may have your calendar sitting here, but you could have a to-do list associated with whatever and sticky notes for part of whatever. And so you can actually have this one view that says, hey, for project X, I've got my calendar so I can see what's going on with meetings related to that. I can see a to-do list over here, and you can kind of reformat what Outlook looks like for that particular project or that particular task or event or whatever you're doing, rather than just saying, here's my calendar, and now I'll go over to this tab for this other thing and this tab for that other thing. I think that can be interesting if it actually ends up working out well. Again, that's something that now that it's rolled out and it's for Outlook on the web, there's probably a good chance that we may have it out there now.
Yeah, the final thing I'll mention, just because I feel like I'm obligated to, if you're in commercial, a new Exchange Admin Center has been launched. The main features of the new things that you're going to see from here, they have capabilities built-in design for tenant-to-tenant migration and G Suite to Office 365 migration built into the migration tabs. So if you haven't seen it yet, new things coming. I've actually had two different support cases where I've been working with my partners, and basically we've been told by Microsoft support, yeah, that's happening to the old Exchange Admin Center. They don't even want to look into it. It's not worth it because they have this new one coming out. So at least if you're on commercial, should be there. They say as of April, so I'm assuming it should be there in more or less everyone's tenant now. So finally, moving on to the great, well, not finally, I guess we do have some canceled, but moving on to the wonderful world of launch. Tom, you want to go ahead and take it away again?
Sure. This is really ones where we've discussed these things ad infinitum over and over and over again. There's only two that really popped out that I want to mention, because one, I don't think I had quite caught what it meant, which I think is cool. And the other one's going to be a nod to Tamra, because it was hysterical when she first talked about it. So the first one is Excel, workbook link support for Excel on the web. I can't tell you how many times people have attempted to open up an Excel file, it attempts to open it in the browser, and you get an error that says, workbook links are not supported. Please launch the browser, or please launch the client to continue. Well, that's a pain in the butt, and it was kind of limiting because apparently a lot of people do that, because I saw that error quite frequently. All of a sudden you don't see that error anymore because now they support it, and it just rips right through and runs, and you don't even have that error show up. So I think that's a good thing to make the browser at least one step closer to a lot better feature parity. is the client. And I think that was one of the ones that was really slowing people down. It was one of the errors I saw most frequently. The other one I wanted to mention is in Microsoft Lists, they're now having Smart People Picker, which means that when you've got a people picker field, it actually uses AI to figure out who are the people you probably met based on the context of what you're doing, who you usually pick, and the whole bit. The reason I laugh every time I see this is because when we first discussed it, Tamara mentioned this. She goes, now I just want to know, how does it figure out who the smart people are and how you're going to pick those people to be able to pull from? We laughed hysterically for 5 minutes because that's just who we are and what we do. So yeah, it apparently knows who the smart people are in your organization now, and it will show you who those are when you're using a people picker. So awesome stuff.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give a shout out to a couple things that are important for the partners that I work with. So for GCC and GCC High people, one DLP for Microsoft Teams should now be launched. So if you wanted to add the chat functionality, the channel messages, stuff like that in Teams, which is something that has been sorely lacking on the government side, that is now available so you can protect the data. And then sensitivity labeling inside the government cloud with sensitive information types. So going through and saying, hey, I want to flag anything that has credit card data. I want to flag anything that has PII or has HIPAA data. That is now available in AIP for the government clouds as well. I'm sure we've talked about that before, but the fact that they're actually launched, long overdue for some of my customers. So really, really happy to see that. Besides that, there's a couple other things. We've talked a lot about some of them, as Tom kind of mentioned. A lot of stuff about some of the things with Teams rooms and some of the things they can do for that, because Microsoft seems to have really been pushing Teams rooms recently. Some random updates for the Compliance Center around insider risk management and some of the tools there. We've watched those progress through the roadmap over the last 3 months or so, where they have very specific updates about a feature inside of the Compliance Center. As a whole, I think that's all really cool, just because again, that's just them enhancing their feature set to make available for companies. So excited to see that. And then shout out from the previous one, they actually have the Exchange Admin Center for GCC as launched in here. So it looks like hopefully the new experience is going to be available for GCC customers as well. Any final things you want to mention in launch, Tom?
I am going to go completely off the board right now,
Okay.
which if for something that didn't even make the roadmap because it was more of a Microsoft Mechanics feature thing that they just slipped in apparently in preview mode, which is really freaking cool. Learned about this from a colleague who tweeted it this morning, tried it out, and all my internal customers are like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever. And that is, you now have the ability when you're using Word on the web to export to a PowerPoint slide deck. And what you do is you take your Word document, you go to File, Export, and you now have an option called Export to PowerPoint Presentations. Got the little preview next to it. You hit that, it comes up and says, pick your design. So it gives you some really nice visual design things. You click that, it gives you a couple, hey, working on it. Hey, almost there, 10 seconds later, boom, you have a PowerPoint slide deck that takes much of the content that you had in the Word doc and creates a really great looking starting slide deck. It doesn't do the other media like images and stuff like that. It's only text, and it's not absolutely all the text that you have in the Word document, but it really sets it up nice in the number of slides, the number of bullet points. And I'm looking at this going, oh my God, this is freaking awesome. Especially if you're the type of person who likes to use Word to outline what a presentation is going to be. Well, you can now do that, turn around, export that to a PowerPoint slide deck, and you pretty much have the core outline of your slide deck in place. And now you can start filling in with images and some updated text and the whole bit. Give that a try. It is really awesome. I was really impressed. So cool stuff.
Yeah. I'll give one final shout out too. I actually saw this by chance, and doesn't really matter to me, but I know some people are going to care. Microsoft, for the first time in 13 years, is going to be updating their default font for all of their applications.
I saw that.
So Calibri or whatever it is going to be going away. But rather than just going through and having this is the new font, there's actually 5 different choices. So if you're curious, go to blogs.office365.com. There's a post from last week where they announced this, and you can actually see images showing the different text. All of the new options that are potentially going to be the default font are downloadable if you have Office 365. The default is basically changing through there. If you have a standalone version of Office, that won't change until you get a major update or potentially a new version. But for our Office 365 users, because this is the M365 Pulse, you will see the new default change to one of those 5. So they're currently looking for feedback. If it's something you're passionate about with font types, you can go in and take a look. I thought it was cool that you could download and try them all now. To me, they don't look that much different. They're all a general thing. Some are slightly bigger than the others. I kind of thought there might be an uprising of like young kids in school that like, no, we need to pick the biggest one because they get like the 10 pages typed to do. But yeah, we'll see. I thought that was kind of cool. If you care about font size, might be worth taking a look at.
So Adam, please tell me that one of the fonts is something like Fonty McFontface.
No, unfortunately, they all have names. It's really too like if you go and look at the blog, it's a very. I'm getting feedback about I'm getting like flashbacks about going through and looking at when I was at Ignite with that story I like to tell about.
Oh yes. Yes.
Because when you go through and you look at their thing, I'll actually put this in chat for you right now, Tom, so you can see it. But when you go through and you look at their thing, like they clearly tried really. It's a very stylized blog post that shows the font in like a very like different colored and size and like almost like a modern interpretation of what they're going through and doing with it. So the 3 that they're looking at is Tenorite, Bierstad, Skinna, Seaford, Grandview. But yeah, you have to go look at the blog post. They clearly take themselves very seriously whenever they go through and talk about what it is and how they're going to do the typeface. Again, if you're a design person, I could definitely see people potentially really liking this. But yeah, I thought it was kind of a cool thing. I notified some of my partners just because like, hey, if you care about this, you should know. So anyways, wrapping out the show, we technically have 4 canceled this week, but 3 of the 4 canceled are duplicates, or 2 of the 4 canceled are duplicates. So when you go through and you look, I'm not going to worry about those because they're duplicates and going through. To look at the ones that were actually canceled, they do have one that says this feature is being postponed indefinitely and will be removed. That was the idea of Office 365 message encryption, what they were calling updates for mail servers, and they basically said they were rolling out OME updates that created a more authentic OME experience. I don't know why they're canceling that. Maybe they're deciding they want to put all of their encryption stuff under AIP. I don't really know what they're doing, but that's been canceled. And then the other one was the idea of Power App and Teams usage analytics inside the Teams admin center. Whether they're putting this inside a compliance admin center or what, they don't necessarily say, but that's being canceled as well.
Okay.
So besides that, guys, that was our show. Thank you for joining us. Tom and I appreciated having you, and hopefully we'll be back with the whole crew next week.
Sounds good.
Bye guys.